everybody. I'm here today at Cardano Summit, and we're going to have a great chat with Onur Özcan, who is product manager at the Cardano Foundation, about a product that he has been working on. But before we dive straight into the conversation, maybe you could just give me a little bit of background on your role. What do you actually do at Cardano Foundation, and how did you end up there?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Onur Özcan. I'm a product manager with Cardano Foundation within the Engineering and Development Division, where we build products and technical enablers, which makes it easier to interact with Cardano and also drive enterprise adoption. And Cardano Explorer that we are talking about here is a critical component of that as well.
Got it. Okay, and you've been working on a block explorer specifically for Cardano. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about this product. What is it, and specifically who is it for? Because I think you've got a specific user in mind when you were designing this.
Cardano Explorer, as the name suggests, is a way to navigate the transactions, the Cardano blockchain itself, in a way that feels intuitive and understandable to a large audience. What we are building for specifically in the case of Cardano Explorer from the Cardano Foundation side is a very specific audience around regulators, policymakers, and regulated entities themselves, which have a very specific need around understanding the blockchain and ways to interact with what it actually means for what they are interested in and how they can consume this information.
Got it. Okay, so a specific block explorer for regulators and policymakers. Very interesting. So what problem is this solving? You know, what did you see that we needed a specific solution for this particular user?
When we look into any blockchain, what we look into and what we actually see is that every transaction is actually telling us a story. There's the properties of the transactions. There's the parameters that we look into and can understand from the perspective of an engineer. Are they always understandable the same way? What is beyond what is the story that the transaction is telling us? Is it possible to piece it together for different kinds of audiences that actually interact with, are interested in, or curious about the blockchain? In this case of Cardano, that is the angle we are looking at it from. And when we are thinking of the Cardano Explorer, it is a public tool in that sense. But what we are doing is that we are making it from that perspective of a regulator or a policymaker to think about what are the pieces, what are the properties of Cardano that can use an explanation or understanding from their perspective of what they're looking into, with the example of staking as an example. Cardano Foundation interacts with the regulators and policymakers as well, provides guidance and explanations on how the blockchain works, and this is, for example, a topic that also is part of the Explorer about how staking actually works. We can look into an individual transaction and we can see all the individual transactions that make the staking lifecycle itself. But how do we actually explain it in a way that our audience, our target user group, does not need to go into, say, a Cardano improvement proposal to read the details or read the blockchain code without the expertise of Cardano, or without having to necessarily understand how Cardano actually works, without making it a prerequisite.
Yeah, that seems really important because, as you said, you know, an engineer looking at a block explorer, they might be able to determine exactly what they're looking at, but for a regulator, you know, they've got a very specific set of criteria that they want to be able to meet. So I can completely understand why you'd need some kind of product to be able to help them interpret that information in that way. So maybe we could tackle some misconceptions, though. So, you know, do people sometimes misunderstand what this product is for, or what are some things that they commonly get wrong?
I could imagine that is the case for many block explorers, not probably specific to Cardano ecosystem either. Yeah. When we think about a block explorer, it is easy to draw some parallels between what a compliance tool is, what a forensics tool is, and what is a block explorer. Yeah. What we address in the case of Cardano Explorer is making a gateway to the blockchain transactions live and in its full past history, which is publicly available, making it understandable without diluting the meaning or without abstracting it. What we are not doing is making this as like a compliance tool or forensics track and trace solution. We are more focused on making it transparent and understandable of what is already on chain and what Cardano already is at present.
Awesome. Yeah, that really helps me understand kind of where it fits into the various tool sets. So how do you actually use it and access it? If someone just wanted to go and check it out today, how do they actually do that?
All that it requires is a web browser. It could be any. And we have the publicly accessible web link, and that is a web application. So effectively it works on the browser. And it does not require a sign-in, though we have the possibility to connect your wallet, or you can specify a username and password. Most of the functionality is also available without any sort of sign-in required as well.
Got it.
So that is accessible to anyone. And,
you don't have to be a regulator. It can just be anyone.
You don't have to be a regulator.
Oh, cool.
And that is also designed in a way that is accessible and that is visible and from the mobile browser as well, from the mobile phone or tablets.
Yeah, you were mentioning that, a mobile-friendly version of this. I think that must be something that was a key design consideration, because I know Cardano too has a big focus on blockchain adoption within emerging markets, where mobile is definitely the #1 device. So take me through some of the other design considerations.
The design considerations, I would say, are twofold. One is the technical architecture, the technology components that actually we have considered in building the Cardano Explorer. So we are working with a modular architecture that are understandable, digestible, and can be built on by a wider audience.
Yep.
So the architecture that we are leveraging is very modular, and also the programming languages that we are using. For example, we are using Java for the backend and TypeScript for the front end. So we can say that they are very accessible languages to interact with, and also that helps with the objective to make it available as public code repositories, publicly available, and open source licensed as well for ongoing building. The second aspect of it is user experience.
Yep.
As we just talked about it a couple minutes ago, every transaction, every property of Cardano tells us a story.
Yeah.
And there are different ways to come to that story. What is it telling me? And what we find ourselves often is that we are looking into the core concept, say for smart contracts, for example, and then getting into the every detail to understand what is the overall perspective there. What is everything that we potentially could want to display or could be interested in? And from there, also understanding and zooming out again. So what is the core matter here? If we are taking something away from it for our audience, what is the most important thing to know? And doing that is a very interesting user experience challenge. Doing that in a way that we are not abstracting away the actual meaning, or we are not changing the meaning.
What's an example of that? Like, is there something that you chose to really kind of highlight in terms of the UI when you're looking at it and trying to interpret this data? Like, what's something that you chose to highlight very much for this particular audience?
One of the features that we introduced is staking lifecycle.
Yeah.
That, for example, are following the key properties of operational certificates that define what is a delegation, what is a stake pool registration or deregistration. And those are clear, those are on public blockchain, they are there. And a user would need their way to find them and interpret them as well, to see what they actually mean in a context. That is what we have explained in an infographic-like way. But it is not just purely educational. In a way, you type a stake address for the delegator view, or you type a stake pool ID for the stake pool view. And what it shows you is step by step, every possible life cycle step as we broke them down into, say, a registration, delegation, reward payouts, and deregistration as well. And in that way, it breaks down and shows the actual context too. Here's the transaction ID. If I want to go and see the full data, And here is actually what is happening. Here is the delegator. Here is the Cardano blockchain. Here is the certificate. That is the core matter of this transaction, and also explains it alongside for the user if they're looking for more context than what the transaction is showing them. It is there and available for them. So that is the way that we are, for the case of staking, explaining how it actually works. And it also addresses questions around when someone thinks about staking, for example. Is there slashing? Is there lock-in periods? Things like that are made clear in a way that for an actual transaction or actual delegator, actual stake pool, not just an infographic showing how Cardano staking works, but in the case of a delegator, in the case of a stake pool, what have they gone through? What has been their journey? What are the possible remaining steps? Maybe I'm a delegator who has not unregistered yet, but I see that from the outside view that it is a possible step in staking. I can also unstake at any time. And having that transparency is very important as well for our core user group, but potentially for everyone. That's also the reason Cardano Explorer is public.
Yeah, I can definitely see how being able to see that in a visual representation would be just so much easier than sort of trying to comb through a ledger like a lot of people might be used to in a standard version of a block explorer. So that's very interesting. Yeah. Just one thing that I wanted to bring up that I thought was really interesting when you were giving me a little product demo the other day was I know that you're very open to industry feedback, right? There's even a chat box in the product where people can let you know what features they might like to see in future or report bugs. Like, talk us through that, because that seems like a pretty interesting approach in terms of making sure that you're getting that feedback on the go.
It's always interesting to find multiple ways to connect with the users, and valuable feedback comes from all different directions and channels. Users have their different preferences in that regard. So what we have enabled in the tool as well, there's a question mark that pops up on the main page and across the navigation in the Explorer, where it is possible to log an issue and create a ticket with the support team to look into, but it doesn't have to be an issue. Sometimes when we are seeing how blockchain is represented, or maybe I'm just a Cardano curious person and I'm learning about Cardano in the process, and I have a suggestion, I have an idea. That is one way that users are totally able to provide their feedback to us as well. And in that way, as much as I care about potential issues, I do care about ideas as well. It comes in both ways as well.
That's really interesting, and it'll be very interesting to see how the community builds on top of it too. You were mentioning that it'll be open source in the future, so it'll be great to see how people extend on that. So just, you mentioned open source, but what else is next? What else can people expect from this as it continues to evolve?
We have our open beta phase since August and publicly available, usable by any user that goes to our website. And that is just the start, right? So we couldn't wait any longer to share what we have because it already is usable, and we believe it's useful for the Cardano ecosystem and our core user group with the regulators and policymakers. And there's more to come. For example, we have the protocol parameters, which we are supporting right now in the tool. It shows you the full lifecycle of what parameters are running Cardano, the key properties of how Cardano actually functions. They are there today. Cardano and blockchain ecosystem overall is evolutionary, right? So what really excites me more is what more to come on top from that specific perspective. For example, our team is very excited about showing the future properties of Cardano as well in the age of Voltaire, which is all about decentralized on-chain governance. So it will only get more interesting as well as we look into the futures to keep making it clear and understandable without having to necessarily go and do the technical research themselves. That is an area that we are looking into. And then having done staking and protocol parameters, one area that we are looking into specifically is smart contracts and Cardano native scripts. How could we possibly make it in a similar way more understandable and more digestible for the audiences? And it's always interesting to find those examples or also the feedback from our user groups in a way that gives us the thought around what may be feeling intuitive for a technical audience, but isn't so for a regulator, for a policymaker, or practically anyone curious about Cardano as well.
Even an average user.
Exactly. And how can we make it available in a way that we use the power of Cardano blockchain data that is on chain, that we are not only educating the user, but we are also overlaying with existing data and putting that into the context.
Yeah.
So we will never run out of opportunities and options to make that for an evolutionary technology area like blockchain, and in an exciting blockchain like Cardano itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you've got that real commitment to decentralization, then tools like this are going to be absolutely key in empowering people to be able to interpret that very technical information and turn it into something usable. Thank you so much for walking me through this. I think it's a very, very interesting product, and looking forward to seeing how it evolves over the coming months and years. Thanks, Onur.
Thank you for having me.